DigitalJamSessions.com.
Hello and welcome to this Digital Jam session. Today we are led by a guest host.
DigitalJamSessions.com.
Hello everyone, it's Mookie Colhan back again, guest hosting for the lovely Tanya Laird. Welcome to Digital Jam Sessions. I am in downtown, very hot, very sweaty, very armpity, New York City. And with me is the lovely, lovely, lovely Kathleen Wallace. Say hello, Kathleen.
Hi, everyone.
I basically made her not go back to work so we can be doing this podcast. But, you know, we've met up for the love of the Digital Jam Sessions to discuss the arts of storytelling, everything about the neuroscience and how it's been looping back in. And you did a keynote recently. So we're going to kick things off with a little quick intro about each other. And then take it away, because I'd love to hear more about this keynote that you did. So once again, I'm Mookie Colhan. I run Mookie International. I'm an executive digital producer covering a cross-platform production in the digital space, from web to immersive content to live streaming and social. And Kathleen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I am a storyteller, and that is what I tell the IRS, and because I can do a number of different things. And that all fall under the umbrella of storyteller, and the IRS goes, oh, okay. So, but that means that I'm a writer, producer, a teacher, a coach, public speaker, all sorts of different things. But it all revolves around communications and storytelling.
Perfect. And all of that ties in with so much of what Digital Jam Limited is about, so much of what Digital Jam Sessions have been about, you know, looping back into the VR writers room and non-VR writers room. So tell me about the keynote you did recently. So where was it? What was the name of it again? And tell us a bit some of the highlights there.
Yeah, so it was the Future of Film Festival, and it was a virtual festival based in Berlin, even though I'm in New York. And it was there were two tracks. It was women in film and also immersive technology. So really nailing this audience.
So the festival's in Berlin, but you stayed in New York for it.
Yes.
So you were virtually.
It was an online festival. So
cool.
So all of the keynotes, all the panels, everything happened online. So you could participate from anywhere in the world. Yeah. So I gave a keynote from my living room floor.
Brilliant. Okay, so remind us the name of the keynote and what were the major points coming out of that, and then if people were able to ask questions cyberly, what were the big conversation points? So
the big thing the title of the keynote was Harnessing the Power of Storytelling and the Responsibility of Storytellers. And basically the big points were that storytelling deeply and profoundly impacts our brains. Storytelling deeply and profoundly impacts our society, and that we have the way that we can tell stories now has changed, and we are constantly surrounded by stories. And particularly as we have ways of making stories seem real, we have to become very, very discerning about what we accept and what we reject in terms of storytelling. And that is as consumers of storytelling.
Right.
As creators of stories, as storytellers, that takes on a whole new dimension of responsibility. Mm-hmm. Because we are now telling our stories across platforms. Mm-hmm. It is being reinforced. Yeah, so one of the things that we know from neuroscience is that when we hear stories, all parts of our brains light up. And this does a couple things. One, our brains have a hard time differentiating between what is real and what is imagined. Mm-hmm. And if you want to consider a way of where you've experienced this in your life, think about when you've watched a scary movie.
Okay.
You know that you're safe. You know that you're on your couch wrapped in a blanket with popcorn on your lap, whatever it is. Like, you know.
Or on the floor.
Or on the floor. Yeah, exactly. You know, whatever it is. Like, if it's hiding beneath the blanket, you know you're okay. And yet your heart rate still gets really high. You're hiding underneath that blanket, all these different things. And it's because your brain can't differentiate between what is actually a threat and what is an imagined threat. And what starts to happen is then our brain starts to light up in different areas and starts to produce different hormones. like cortisol, which is the stress hormone.
Yeah.
Cortisol, when we're frightened, our brain produces cortisol when we're frightened because it focuses us.
Yeah.
The thing is, the more we, when I talk about the cortisol, I want you to think about the news. I want you to think about we are constantly bombarded with.
Right.
Every day.
Yeah.
Alerts popping up, Danger Will Robinson, like the whole 9 yards. So we also know that the more we think a certain way, the more we do things over and over again, the more our brain produces the same kinds of hormones, the stronger the connections are built in our brains, so that we don't have to work as hard to think as hard for doing the same thing that we've been doing for a while, or thinking the way that we've been thinking for a while. So a way to think about this in your life, or you've seen in your life, is tying your shoes.
Okay.
When you first started learning how to tie your shoes, you had to really think about it.
Yeah.
And then you did it enough times, your brain started to create those connections.
That memory.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But it's actually, they've done scans of brains of people who meditate. And the people who meditate, the areas of their brain, the prefrontal cortex, and areas of their brain that are less engaged in fight or flight are actually thicker. And
because they've built up some defenses.
Because they've built it up. Okay. Because our brain actually changes. Our brain will actually grow. It's called neuroplasticity.
Okay.
So what that means for us as storytellers is that the more stories are reinforced, the more likely our audience is to think that way.
Right.
Now think about transmedia. Think about all the platforms across which we are now telling stories. Yes. Think about how many times.
And there are many.
And there are, as this audience in particular will know, there are many. Think about how many ways these different stories are being reinforced. So that means that the more they're reinforcing, the faster those connections are being built, the more we're going to get entrenched in that way of thinking or seeing the world a certain way.
Right. And what's crazier now is that blurred line of what's true or false. Exactly. And I did want to, so my eyeballs were lighting up earlier a couple minutes ago when, like, you know, that fake news, you know, it's still a topic a year later. Yeah. It's July 2018, ladies and gentlemen, and we're still talking about what's fake news, what's not fake news. And we do know it has been harder as journalists, as storytellers, to be staying true to yourself and also trying to make sure that you're telling that story in the way that you know it should be told, because you are writing the truth, you know, as legitimate, honest writers. And then the fake news scandals that have been happening in the last 2 years or whatever makes it harder for people to kind of, you know, show that the integrity is real, show that all that legitimateness is real. So we do know like Facebook, we know are you know, and other tech companies are taking some responsibility and stepping their game up to be a little bit more responsible, to get the fact checkers in. XYZ, what's a fake account? What's this account that could potentially block you as a storyteller from having your integrity damaged or saved almost. So I guess, you know, with all that in mind, how have your studies found how a proper storyteller still plows through and perseveres with the story that they have to tell? Yeah. Do you find most storytellers are thinking about, oh my gosh, I'm going to be super judged, people are going to think it's faked? Or do you find you know, the creatives that are all around us are actually doing what they need to do and not thinking, not giving a flying hoo-ha about anybody else?
Yeah, I'm pretty fortunate in that I'm surrounded by people who, I should say, I surround myself with people who think a lot about these kinds of things. Good choice. Thank you. I'm gonna go with good bubble. It's my good bubble. It's my good bubble. But I'm surrounded by a lot of people who think this way, and one of the things that I find very interesting in the conversations that I have with these people is, where are we falling? Mm-hmm. Because we can have the best of intentions, and with one word we can change a story. All it takes is one
word that you're writing, or one word that people are responding to. So knowing things are published across platforms, if one person doubts you or judges you.
I mean, literally one word. Right. I mean, there was a study that was done in 1975 on, it was college students.
Way before social media.
way before
It's called
Twitter.
writing letters to an editor then, right?
Exactly. There was a study done in 1975 where a group of college students, we'll call them Group A, were told that they were going to give shocks to a group of students from another college. We'll call them college students B.
Mm-hmm.
And college students A, one group of college students from Group A, heard researchers refer to Group B as animals.
Okay.
Then,
Why was that?
That was because the researchers wanted to see what just hearing that one word would do to whether or not to the shocks that Group A would administer to Group B. And what they found was that if students in Group A heard students in Group B defined as animals or described as animals, that they were more likely to give longer and harder shocks than if they heard Group B described as nice.
Wow.
Now, we're in New York.
1975.
1975. I want you to think back to Twitter from a couple weeks ago, to the president of this country referring to people coming into this country. And what word did he use? Called them animals. And this is what I mean when I say one word can change the story.
Yeah.
I'll give you another example.
So
I went to, go ahead.
Twitter, sorry, but Twitter being another platform for storytelling.
That's exactly right. All of these different things, we have to, as storytellers, we have to be cognizant that every time we interact with an audience, we are either reinforcing or a story or working against a story.
Yeah.
And so we have to be really vigilant about this. And so I'll give you another example. A couple weeks ago was at an event at the Irish Consulate here in New York City, and it was a talk on, it was a day of intersections between Irish Americans and Indigenous Americans.
Okay.
And the first speaker got up and talked about when Christopher Columbus discovered America, and then he paused and he said, when Christopher Columbus made contact with America. And I want you to think about the difference that's told with that one word. It changes the story entirely.
Because he didn't technically discover America. It was like there were
people here.
Yeah.
The people who were here knew it was here. It was not a surprise to them.
And in a fantastic irony, it is Independence Day in 2 days' time. So it is like Independence Week here in the U.S. of, hey, that this gets brought up. So that's interesting.
Yeah. So speaking of stories, who's independent from whom? There are a lot of indigenous people in this country.
So much to think about. Well, exactly. Yeah. So things haven't changed in 200 years.
No, so things haven't changed in 200. And this is and even though things haven't changed in 200 years, in terms of the way we're thinking about a lot of these stories, what has changed is the way that we get to reinforce these stories. So we have Twitter, we have Facebook, we have Snapchat, we have immersive technologies, we have all these different things. And if we think about, and just to pause for a second on the immersive technologies, we think about back to the impact of storytelling on our brains. Now imagine if our brain can't determine what's fake and what's real, imagine how that impacts our brains to the nth degree when we're fully immersed in the story. So
there could be more parts of the brain yet to discover.
Exactly. Like, I don't know of any studies that have been done on this. I'm sure that there's some happening out there somewhere.
It's resting in your hands, Kathleen Wallace. Tilts head back, cackles, wrings hands.
So I really strongly feel that as storytellers, we have to be very conscientious and we have to be very deliberate.
And some sense of social responsibility, maybe, or screw it, just go for it.
I think 100% social responsibility. I think that if that part of that deliberateness and part of that conscientiousness is stopping and asking ourselves, okay, what really is the story that I'm telling? I'll give you another example. So when I take flights, I love to watch movies that other people are watching. I'm that creepy person who's looking.
Oh wait, so you don't what everyone else is watching, and you're just join in. You're actually looking at the screen next to you.
I like to know what other people are. As somebody who's in this industry, I want to know what people are choosing to watch, what they're choosing to consume. And two, I'm fascinated by what movies without sound, what the story is when you watch a movie without sound.
So you're doing your own social neurological experiment while being a courteous voyeur.
Exactly. I'm multitasking.
It's a beautiful thing. As long as there's no glare on the screen and you can actually see it.
As long as I don't actually rest my head on the shoulder next to the person.
Sorry. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Oh, could you rewind that bit? I missed that last bit.
I love all Marvel films. Yeah, rewind it.
So I was watching one play. I was watching Anchorman, the Will Ferrell movie.
Love
Anchorman.
it. Big fan.
Never seen it except without the sound.
Well, that's a movie you definitely need the sound on.
Well, except that the story told by the visuals for me is that it's a movie about sexual harassment, and the story is that if you just sexually harass the only woman in your office enough, she will 1, have sex with you, 2, fall in love with you, and then 3, share all of her success with you.
Yeah. Lessons in life, right?
Lessons in life. So this is the thing though, is that this is, if you watch just the visuals, me having a vague idea of what the movie is about. I mean, it's not really that complicated of a story, so having a vague idea of what the story is about. But if I watch just the visuals, that's the story that I'm receiving.
Goodness me.
These are the things that, again, as storytellers, it's what exactly are the words that you're choosing mean? What exactly are the visuals that you're choosing mean? When you cast your characters, why are you seeing a character in a certain way? If you're casting someone as a white cisgender hetero character, what is it that you're saying if this is the person, if that's what that person looks like to you?
Well, you're defining the role of what you wrote for or what the writer has written.
Exactly.
And it's up to the actor to successfully interpret it, which doesn't get to happen all the time with a lot of written words that you either read on social or in a book. Yeah. Remember books, everybody, or ebooks or newspapers, because each individual reading that will be interpreting it in a different way. Yeah. But looping back to the film, even if the actor is perfectly cast, such as Will Ferrell in Anchorman, and the whole cast, I think, was wonderful in that, you're seeing something different. The choice of actor is a story in and of itself. Completely, 1,000%.
Yeah. So that as we think about storytelling across all these different platforms, we also have to think about storytelling in terms of the layers of what are my words saying, what are my visuals saying, what is my casting saying, what is my marketing saying.
Yeah.
These all go into reinforcing what this story is. And so if we want to, and I believe to the core of my being, all of my work circles around the idea that stories can change the world, that if we change the narrative, we can change the world. And that if we're going to change those narratives, we have to really step back and ask ourselves, what is the story that I'm telling?
Exactly. So we've got a bit of a master class of storytelling, stroke the art of storytelling, stroke integrating neurolinguistic science elements into social responsibility.
Yeah, 100%.
Lesson. And I know you've got to get back off. So I'm going to let you go with our Digital Jam Sessions big question. What's the one thing that you think needs to change, be that culturally or technically, in this world of your worlds of storytelling?
And it's going to seem counterintuitive. It's listening. I think that we don't listen to each other. I think that the people we listen... Wait, what was that?
That was a joke. And you are...
What were we talking about? Back to me. But I think that's what we do, is that a lot of times we think we're listening to someone else. What we're really doing is listening to that little voice inside of our head. And we're listening for agreement. We're listening for rejection. We're listening to... We start with the idea that we have coming into the conversation, and we never get out of that. And we end up then not actually having a conversation with another person. We end up having a conversation in our own head about the other person and what that person is saying.
Right.
And I think that if we are truly going to be storytellers who reflect the world and change the world, preferably for the better, then we have to really stop talking to ourselves and open our ears and listen.
Or that little voice in your head should be telling you to listen a bit more. And I think the art of listening could be the next podcast. And I thank you so much, Kathleen Walls, live from downtown New York City. We are, we're like Lower Manhattan, aren't we, really? Yeah, and it's a sticky day, but it's nice and cool in the Matcha Cafe. And so how can our lovely listeners reach you via the social media handle of your choice, please?
Yeah, so speaking of storytelling, you can find all of my stories on Twitter at Kathleen Wallace.
Perfect. And as always, you can find me at Mookie Approved on Twitter and other platforms, and Mookie Callahan on LinkedIn. Thank you so much, Kathleen. Thank you, New York City. Part one of a couple different New York tales. New York Tech Tales, I think is what we'll call it. And as always, you can like and request different topics on Digital Jam Sessions, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this content, don't forget to subscribe and review, and follow us on Twitter at Digital Jam Ltd. Thinking of starting your own podcast? Why not speak to the GL Pro UK team? They handle all of our podcasting service needs. Tell them that Digital Jam Session sent you and you'll get 10% off your first order. Find out more at www.glpro.co.uk.
digitaljamsessions.com